Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank the ranking member. I think this has been a very informative hearing, and I regret that I've been in another hearing and am not able to follow all of what's been, and ourselves being in two places at once and difficult to achieve. Let's start with what I believe the public perceives as an issue. Just the mere notion that the federal government cannot protect its networks. It's probably hard for the typical consumer to understand how the federal government can't protect its networks, and if it can't, then there is probably a belief that it's going to be difficult for the private sector to secure its networks. Perhaps this has been answered, but do we have, in collaborating with the private sector, have we identified the private sector networks that are so important to our country that we, the federal government, should have a greater hand in protecting them? Ever like to respond to do so?
Congressman, if I could start with that and then defer to my counterpart, Jen Easterly, to complete the answer. I think first and foremost, you properly point to the public's expectation that federal networks will be properly built, properly defended to deliver the functions, the services that they expect. We've taken aggressive effort to do that. The executive order in May, the binding operational directive that Ms. Easterly talked about earlier in this hearing are both aimed at doing just that, but we have further work to do. As to whether we should take then further effort to define the critical functions that serve the public, both within and within the private sector, there is further work to be done in that regard. We call that systemically critical infrastructure. It's a challenge to define what that is, given there are so many possibilities and therefore so many components that underpin those possibilities, but CISA has taken that work on, and with the support of this Congress and this committee in particular, I think that we can make progress.
Does the lady desire to have a comment?
So is that for me?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry. Did you have a response?
Yeah, thank you. I would just add to Director Inglis's points. We are, in fact, moving out on identifying that primary systemically important entities. It is a serious and complex effort. We're working through it, and so I'm hopeful that we'll have a preliminary view on that in the coming months. And I would absolutely agree with you that the federal government has to lead by example. The private sector can't look at us and expect us to not be able to defend our own network. So all of the work we're doing pursuant to the President's EO to modernize our federal civilian executive branch networks, to create visibility, to ensure that we can actually manage that enterprise as an enterprise, not as 102 separate little tribes. We are working very aggressively to do that, and I'm optimistic that we're going to make a real difference, because I think we all know that the status quo is unacceptable.
Thank you. With my 1 minute and 10 or so seconds left, let's talk quickly about diversity, workforce diversity. It is my understanding that CISA recently announced a $2 million grant or grants bring cybersecurity training to rural and diverse communities. What are the processes that we're putting in place to make sure that we do this in an efficacious way? My concern is that rural and minority communities too often are left behind, and this is a great opportunity to make sure that they're brought into the fold. Can you give me some sense of what the process will be to make sure that we're doing this appropriately?
Yeah, Thanks for asking that question. I'm hugely passionate about this. I am a big believer that you have to build a talent management ecosystem that allows you to tap into diverse pipelines. because that diversity that looks like America will enable us to solve the toughest problems. I've always believed that since my early days as one of the few women at West Point, and in my time in the private sector where I built an organization that was 50% women, 25% Black and Hispanic. So the kind of things that we're moving out on are lessons that I've drawn from previous aspects in my career. You point to the great grants, $1 million for NPower, $1 million for the Cyber Warrior Foundation, focused on developing unrealized talent in underserved communities. And that's just the beginning. We're also working to create a pipeline with things like the Girl Scouts. We just created a collaborative relationship with Girls Who Code. I'm looking forward to working with folks on this committee to be able to tap into historically Black colleges and universities to create a vibrant pipeline there. And I am open to all great ideas. So I'd love to work with you, Congressman, if this is a passion of yours as well.
It is a passion. And Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for the time. That's one of the better answers that I've heard.